So is this particular slide visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so whenever we start talking about ecology and evolution, the very first thing that comes to our mind is the environment. So there have been a lot of definitions about environment. So nowadays we hear it a lot that the environment is getting polluted, environment is not that healthy, environment is not that conducive. So even like if you are, let's say, coming to a market, or if you are going to different metros or bigger cities, there people say that the environment is really polluted. So now the question arises that what is this environment? So there has been a lot of definitions regarding this, and ecology has tried to address what that particular environment is. So before we talk about other things, let's say we talk about the ecology. So what is ecology? So it is the scientific study of the interaction between organism and the environment. So environment in general is our all overall surroundings. So now those overall surroundings could be, let's say if you are sitting in a room, so there the overall surroundings could be just the air that you breathe, the walls, the roof, or maybe if some other of your classmate is sitting with you, so that time, that specific area, the small place, you can say the environment that is there. So now if you are going in a outer perspective, on a bigger perspective, let's say you go outside let's say for example in Central University of Rajasthan. So here your environment is a little bit different. So here it's a little bit hot. If you go to, let's say, the upper north part of India, so there you realize that the environment is a little bit colder. So now depending on what the place is, what the weather is, the interaction varies. So let's say for example in plains, let's say in Rajasthan and UP, you see that it's a dry area. So there the interaction of your interaction with the environment or the other constituents is a little bit different as compared to your interaction with the when you are in the upper north part of India. Now let's say you go down south. So there again the air is humid and warm. So there's a different kind of interaction. Altogether, the vegetation is different, the plants, animals, the microbes. So all the community which is interacting with you is different. So if we study that aspect where the organism, or let's say how we interact with the environment, the microbes, plants, animals, the overall vegetation. So okay, so again coming to the same slide. So this ecology word, it is derived from word oikos, which means house. So it means that it's kind of a dwelling place where the individual lives. So if we talk about different organisms, including humans, then this whole planet appears to be the home, the house of all the people, all the organisms. So this particular branch of science, ecology, it tries to find out what is the interaction of the different organisms, no matter it's the plants, animals, or microbes. So those kind of interactions has to be there, and we try to investigate in ecology. So these usually interaction, they determines the distribution of organisms and their abundance. For let's say for instance that in different areas there is different kind of interaction. So let's say, for example, if we talk about the plains, let's say in Rajasthan specifically. So here you see that the availability of water or the moisture content is less. Now, because of that, the overall availability of vegetation, the plants, the bushes, or any kind of other green vegetation is less. Now, owing to that less availability, there's less availability of food. So that food or the moisture part which is missing, so that will dictate what kind of microbes will be surviving. Now again, those small organisms, they would be eaten by bigger organisms. So now it will also dictate what will be the distribution of a little bit higher organisms, let's say vertebrates, invertebrates, and even it will dictate the kind of mammals that we have. So you might have noticed that in Rajasthan we have abundance of let's say camels, sheep, and goat. However, in the other parts, there are different kind of organisms, different kind of animals altogether, which we can notice at least. So let's say if you go to Assam area, so there you'll find there are a lot of rhinos. If you go to Gujarat and those areas, you'll see there are a lot of lions are there. And also if you go to the northern part of India, let's say Jammu and Kashmir, so there you say bisons are there. So it depends what kind of environment is there, what kind of distribution is. Now, overall, this whole interaction will be dictated by the abundance of food and the abundance and the interaction of the organisms. So if we talk about organism, it means that whole plant, animal, microbes. So they are kind of interacting amongst themselves. Now, these organisms, their interaction is kind of a requirement for their survival, existence, as well continuation. So if let's say we have a very small part of our ecosystem is, let's say, a tree. So if we see that there is a kind of a mango tree or a banyan tree, so there we see that there are a lot of birds. So those birds, they will be staying onto those trees. On the contrary, if we look at a babool tree, so there are very few birds which can stay on that particular babool tree. So now this is the availability of the resources. So in order for those birds to survive, they'll need either the mango tree or the banyan tree. And however, there are some birds which can still survive on the babool tree. So depending on what kind of birds are there, their survival or existence will depend on the availability of the trees. Now, in those trees as well, there are small organisms. So in those babool trees, you'll see there are a lot of small ants. They are also living there. And they are collecting the exudates of those plants, which we call as gond or something like that. However, on let's say mango tree and the people or those banyan trees, there are different kind of organisms. You know, due to availability of the moisture, you'll find that there is a green color fungal or algal distribution is always there. So that kind of microorganism distribution is missing in the dry parts. So by this statement, I mean to say that due to the availability of the natural resources, it may be biotic or abiotic factors. So that overall dictates the survival of the organism. So now let's say, for instance, we take a mango tree and try to plant it in Rajasthan in a very dry part of this particular state. So what will happen to that mango tree is that it won't be able to survive. The reason is that it needs a lot of water. And since the availability of water is really low, it's very poor, so that environment is not conducive for its growth and overall survival. However, the other plants, let's say cactus and the babool trees, they need very less amount of water. So they are kind of adapted to survive in this dry and really scarce availability of water. And that particular interaction is, you can say that the interaction of that particular tree is with the soil, the overall availability of the water. So it's kind of, you can say, there's an interaction of living part and the non-living part. So that dictates the survival as well as the existence. So there's another line here that the ecology includes observation and experimentation. So it is kind of that, let's say, for example, if I say that mango trees, or let's say any, let's say kind of fruits, for example, strawberry. So those kind of plants, they are not capable to survive in dry states. So if I'm quoting that particular example from the ecological perspective, then that is kind of based on my observation. So what the scientists would have done, that they would have traveled across the country, across different zones, different areas. So on the basis of their observation, they have concluded to specific statements. The one which I'm saying, that strawberry or mango trees, it's very difficult for them to survive, or you won't find any strawberry plant in Rajasthan. So now this is observation, and now it has to be proved by the experimentation as well. So in order to prove, what the scientific perspective would be, that we would try to plant strawberry or mango trees in those areas where we don't see any plants of this particular type. So if they are not surviving, then we can say that our observation is corroborated with the experimentation part. So in a way, we can conclude experimentally as well. So we can come to the point that ecology is not only based on speculations, it is based on specific and scientific observations. And these scientific observations have also been verified using experiments. There have been instances where different kind of organisms, either they have been removed from a particular area or they've been added to a particular area, a new area. So that's, let's say for instance, that if we try to introduce a specific organism, maybe a squirrel, which is a really small organism. So if we try to introduce that squirrel in an area where it's not in abundance or where it's rarely seen, so now there are two instances, either it will survive or it will not survive. So as you may be aware, that for that particular squirrel to survive, it needs biotic as well as the abiotic factors. So it will need the availability of food. So that food consists as the biotic factors. So that food could be different kind of nuts, different kind of fruits, or maybe some small organisms. And abiotic factors will be, let's say, the availability of soil, the kind of soil where it can live, the availability of water, the moisture. So, and also the availability of sunlight. So it's kind of a mixture of biotic and abiotic factors that will lead to the existence or the non-survival. So it depends. So modern ecology is based on observation as well as the experimentation. So now usually people ask that what is the scope of ecological research? Why we study ecology? So here I would say that the ecology is involved everywhere. So it is involved right from studying of an organism to the whole planet. So nowadays you'll see that even if different companies, let's say for example, which is making Coca-Cola or Pepsi or maybe any kind of medicines. So there they need to have an ecologist who could let them or who could guide them that what would be the impact of the work that they are doing. So that industrial setup would be releasing some kind of gases. So that gases could be after burning some fuel, or maybe some production of, let's say in case of Coke, some chemicals could be generated. So if they are released into the environment, what will be the impact? So what is the safe way of doing it? What should be the way that before releasing those kind of pollutants into the environment, they can have some kind of treatment plant. So there's a term called the effluent treatment plant. So ETP. So effluent treatment plants, they are usually installed. So I'll give you just a rough idea that you might have traveled on highways. Let's say you're going from Jaipur to Delhi or somewhere. So you might have observed that there is some kind of factory or some kind of industrial area comes. And when there is kind of factory or industry is there, in front or let's say in back part of that, you see a lot of trees are being planted. So the big reason behind is that they try to minimize the kind of effluent or the kind of waste products that will be released while making their products. So those metabolites or those effluents, if they are released, so they try to plant those trees in that area where they will be released. So those trees or those plants, it is expected that they'll absorb those waste products and they will reduce to non-toxic forms. So let's imagine that if those waste products or those toxic products, they are released as such, so they will contaminate the soil as well as they will enter into the water. So ultimately, moving from one plant to another organisms to food and water, ultimately they'll come to us. So overall, it's not only the environment, we will also be affected. So the best way is that those kind of waste products or effluents, they should be treated. They should be rendered non-toxic. So when they are non-toxic, then it's not a problem. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So what we see is that you can have a planet, you can have at a planet or some global ecology. Then you can have this landscape ecology, which is a little bit lower as compared to the whole planet. And below this, we can have this ecosystem ecology. So in that, different landscape, different forms, or let's say in simple terms, you can say that different islands and different parts of the landforms, we can have different kind of ecosystems. And now in those ecosystems, if we go a little bit down, we can have different communities living. So those communities could be different species of plants or animals, even microbes. So if you go a little bit down, then we can see specific populations. So specific populations, and those specific populations, they are dealt in population ecology. And ultimately we come to the organismal ecology. So that's kind of term that we use for when we study about individuals. So let's see this global ecology or the planet ecology here. So the biosphere is the global ecosystem, and this is the sum of all planets' ecosystem. So on the planet, what we see is that there's a lot of water bodies. So there are land masses and the water bodies. So there are different kind of ecosystems on the land masses as well as on the water bodies. There are numerous organisms, different kind of variety of organisms, which are either interacting amongst themselves via, let's say, food chain or food webs, or they are interacting with the surroundings with the availability of the nutrient sources. So there could be, let's say, different kind of cyanobacteria or other organisms which are kind of autotrophs. So they try to utilize sunlight and the chemical resources which are available to them to synthesize their own food. Now from them, they will be eaten by some heterotrophs. Now those heterotrophs in a chain kind of pattern, they will be eaten by higher organisms. So in all those kind of different ecosystems, overall, they are covered in the biosphere. So that's a kind of global ecology. So this ecology examines the influence of energy and materials. So here it's on the global perspective. What we read is that what is the flow of energy and materials. So that is from one organism to another organisms, or overall in the one ecosystem to another ecosystem. Okay, so a little bit smaller perspective is the landscape ecology. So that landscape ecology is a landscape or a seascape. So it's kind of mosaic of connected ecosystems. So you may see that there are different land forms. So these different land forms, they are coming together. So a good example could be areas, the coastal areas, where you see that there is a availability of water and suddenly the water availability reduces. So a good example is Gujarat states. So there, if you go to the coastal areas, there's abundance of water. You see coconut and those plants. And when you go a little bit deeper towards Rajasthan, there is a dry state. So we can see that there are different landscapes which are kind of merging. So it is also possible that those different landscapes could be separated by availability of water. So landscape ecology focuses on the exchange of energy, material and organism across the multiple ecosystems. Now it is possible that different kind of ecosystems, they may be exchanging these different elements. It's not that one ecosystem is completely separated. They are always in the interaction form. So the physical thing that we can notice is, let's say some birds, they are moving from one area to another area. There could be some animals which are, let's say, going to a riverside for water intake, and then they are again coming to the landform. They are coming to the forest area for hunting and other things. So it's kind of interaction between the landform and the water area. So they may be bringing some microorganisms, some bacteria along with them. So they may be surviving here and there, or vice versa. They may be bringing something from the landform to the water area. So then comes the ecosystem ecology. So it is the community of organisms in an area and physical factors which with they interact. So what we see is that let's say there's one beautiful example of forest area. So there we see different kind of organisms are there. So they live in a kind of community. So let's say this bulls and the deers and rhinos, they feed on grass. So they live in specific area. However, there are birds and insects. They would like to live on these areas where small fruits are available. Where let's say chameleon or the lizards, they would like to live in an area where the availability of insects is there. So in a way, we can say that these organisms, they are interacting amongst themselves as well as the physical factors. So this ecosystem ecology emphasizes energy flow and chemical cycling amongst the various biotic and abiotic components. So here the biotic components would be the organisms, the plants and the microbes, and abiotic would be the landform, sunlight, water. So those interactions are counted into ecosystem. So it's kind of a little bit smaller perspective. Then comes the community ecology. So community means it's a group of population of different species in an area. So, so let's say if we give a example of a university, so that university has a community system. So we can see that students and teachers, they are coming from different ethnicities, different parts of the country. So we can say that they are coming together and interacting amongst themselves, although we belong to the same population. So the same species is there, so one population is there. So if we move to a forest or any tropical area, so there we see there are a lot of other species. So different kind of species interacting in that particular area are counted under the community. So this community ecology deals with the interaction of species in a community. So it is possible that different kind of plants, let's say you might have read about this pitcher plant, Nepenthes. So although they are plant, but they are kind of they feed on insects. So they are what we call as carnivorous, something like that. So and there are other plants also which are just surviving on the nutrients which are available from the soil, water, and sunlight. So it's kind of interaction varies. So some plants, they have interaction with the abiotic components, and some plants, they have an interaction with the biotic components. And similarly, onto the plants, if you see this particular image here, you can see that this is a tree trunk. So without tree trunk, there are a lot of other plants are also growing. So now, due to availability of water, it is possible that different kind of fungus or even very small plants, they could survive on through the trunk or branches of other higher trees. So this is also a kind of interaction between that plant microbe and that bigger plant trunk. So in this, we study the interaction of those kind of plants. Okay, so then comes the a more specific or a more smaller terms, which is the population ecology. So this population ecology, it is a group of individuals of the same species living in an area. So this is a very interesting aspect where one would like to investigate that, let's say an insect population, a bird population, or let's say a tiger population is living in that area and how it is interacting with the other organisms. So let's say, for example, if we introduce a large number of tigers in a forest, so what will it do? So it will start hunting the deers. So it will decrease the number of deers. Now this decreased number of deers will ultimately lead to the increase in the plants on which they were surviving. So in a way, the plant area or the forest area will become more dense. So ultimately, we have a kind of indirect upgradation or interaction between the lions and the plants. So now, because of the killing of deers, the plant starts growing. So that kind of studies we do it in population. So it focuses on affecting population size over time. So what are the different reasons? What are the different factors which are affecting a population of organism in a specific area? Okay, so then comes the very small perspective of ecology, which we call as the organismal ecology. So this is, we usually study organism structure, physiology, behavior with the environmental challenges. Now, depending on what is the environment and how they are surviving, so their structural modification changes. And that kind of physiological or the structural modifications have been part of the evolutionary process. So we can further classify into physiological, evolutionary, or behavioral